house, we set this whole basket into his big enclosure that he has, and right above him are limbs and branches and things that he can climb onto if he wants to, but most of the time he just stays in his basket.
I don't blame you,
And he has been, even before, the breeder told Donna when we first were going to pick him up from the airport that when you go to pick him up and you go and you get the container, don't look down in there and think that I forgot to put the sloth in there. He's just covered up in blankets, because if he has a blanket in there with him, he literally covers himself up and will be underneath it. And so we'll have a blanket in there in the basket with him, and then a little blanket over top of him, just give him some, we'll make it a little bit dimmer in there for him. Because their eyes do function better in dim lighting, and I'm sure he probably talked to you about the, the condition they have with their eyes with that broad monochromacy. But their eyes function best in dim lighting. The rod cells, what picks up motion, they work better in the night. And it's kind of like night goggle vision too. If you've ever seen an action movie that has some night goggle vision in it, they probably don't have that green, that green hue to it, but they do see similar to that, where they just see kind of shapes and figures, but can't really distinguish what's what.
Yeah, with the retina, the cones are what give you the color perception.
Yeah. Oh wow. Big yawn. Dash does that a lot. When he goes to yawn, he sticks his tongue way out far like that. They're feeding him broccoli.
Well, that was me. I actually got to feed him.
Yeah.
But that was it.
Yeah.
It was fun.
Yeah.
But I really wanted to hold it.
Yeah. Dash is definitely a lot easier to hold than Zoe because he's so much smaller, a lot less sloth to handle. Now their legs are really sensitive, and so things that touch their legs a lot of times can be startling for them, just because if you think about them, they are an animal that things are after them to get them. And they're on the underside of that branch, and so if there's a jaguar or an ocelot over top of that branch, the first thing they're going to grab is a leg, and so that because of that, the legs are really sensitive for them, so we try not to really touch them that much. The donkey is not very happy.
What is the donkey so mad today?
I know the legs are one of the most fascinating part of the sloth, and especially when they bend back and they show their belly, you just want to pet that belly, because like for a dog or a cat, most of the time they would like that.
Yeah,
But
that's
even,
what they said,
yeah,
is the
even the dog
belly.
scritches like that, where you kind of scritch like that, the sloths cannot stand that, because that for them, it just seems like something's trying to, get a hold of them, because they're geared very much differently than a dog. A dog doesn't have something naturally that's, after them. Whereas the sloth's got a lot of different things in that rainforest that could be to do them harm. One of which being the harpy eagle. I don't know if he mentioned about that, but yeah, the harpy eagle is the most successful thing that's after a sloth, because their talons work similarly to a sloth's, where a sloth's locking mechanism will keep them on this branch like that, and they're not letting go unless they want to. Pulling a sloth down off of a branch is a lot more difficult than lifting that claw up off of the branch, and so for that reason, if a harpy eagle were to come in and grab a hold of a leg and rip it up off, the sloth's coming off that branch a lot more easily. Whereas a jaguar that's going to be on top of that branch is just trying to pull and bite, and that sloth would rather just fall to the floor rather than be picked up by that. And that's what happens a lot of times, is that if something is startling a sloth and they're scared of that, their goal is to just get to the very end of that branch, away from whatever it is that has startled them. Their first line of defense is just to evade that threat. And so they'll go to the very end of that branch, and if it is a jaguar or an ocelot or some type of a big cat that's out there, after that sloth, if it's daring enough to go out to the very end of that branch, and it eventually breaks, that's kind of best case scenario for the sloth, because they're going to be able to survive that fall, and the cat's not going to. The cat's probably going to try to land on all 4 feet, and falling from a height from 100 feet up in the air down, you're probably going to break all 4s. Whereas the sloths just they land like a pancake. They go all 4 feet just straight out, and they land real flat. And all those ribs that they have, the 46 ribs they have total, just this protective casing for their internal organs, and they've got a lot of connective tissue that's also holding all of their organs right where they're supposed to, in the middle of their body cavity. So they don't really sustain any type of internal damage from that.
So does a baby go to the bathroom every 7 days too?
Yep. When the mom comes down.
Lord, how do they even gain weight?
Well, their digestive tracts are extremely slow, and so it takes about 30 days for everything to digest completely through the tract. And so because of that, they really don't have to go but once a week. It's not that they hold it all week long, it's just that they don't feel the urge until about then. And it's both solids and liquids, so it is even a lot
Man,
of
that would be so perfect.
Yeah. You'd think that until the day before that you're supposed to go. You look in there at Zoe and she looks absolutely miserable with that big old Buddha belly and she's just laying back like, oh my goodness. And then the next day, she's like ravishly hungry and cannot get enough food in her mouth. She wants another bite before she even swallows what she got.
It'd be good for deer hunters.
Yeah.
You can go deer hunting the day after, won't that hurt to get done?
Yeah.
This is really his birthday present.
Yeah. Well, it's been about 10 minutes. You guys get 40 minutes with it total, so it's totally up to you guys whenever you guys want to switch. Usually we do about 20 and 20, but if you want to hit the whole longer, that's totally up to you guys.
Sit down, pet.
Did he kind of talk about the conditioning that they went through from a young age to get to this point where they're able to be held and things like that?
Just the flash, was not really held from day one.
Yeah. Yeah, so both Zoe and Dash were both conditioned from a very young age, just like a week old, if not even a little bit sooner than that, where people were, that breeder had the mothers in that program clicker trained to know that when she heard that clicker sound, the breeder's gonna come up and give her a treat and then borrow her baby for just like 10 or 15 seconds while still standing right next to mom. So mom's never stressed out, therefore baby's never stressed out because she's eating a treat, and it's always a positive interaction with that baby. So the baby never sees people as, anything other than, comfort. And so they kind of, that every day that breeder will work with that baby every single day, even 2 or 3 times a day, just slowly coming over and interacting with that baby. So they're never scared of the people. And then it'll slowly build up to then they're spending, 5 minutes holding it, then 10 minutes holding it, and then mom's, wandering away and they're being a little bit further from that mom. So it's always a positive interaction. And then when that baby's weaned around 5 months old, of the mother's own choosing, it's never influenced by the breeder. When that mother chooses to wean that baby, then that baby's used to being held for upwards to an hour a day at a time, and it's completely fine with that. And they almost kind of go from mom being their source of comfort to then humans being their source of comfort. But to pass that ambassador test, all the babies that go through that program have to go through the final ambassador test that proves to the breeder that they do genuinely enjoy and actively seek out human interaction. And if they don't do one or the other of that, they do not pass that program and they will not go to a facility where they're being handled. So sloths are very easy to stress. And if we were to be doing something with them that they did not appreciate, like obviously you can tell he enjoys this type of interaction, but if he were to ever get to the point where he's like, pushing away from people or getting stressed and just trying to get away, you'd completely end that encounter. Now that's never happened and we don't see that ever happening because they are conditioned to enjoy this. So that would be completely out of character for that to happen. But we always put the sloths first and the sloths comfort, Obviously our motto is, human safety is our primary concern. Obviously if an animal were to do something completely unprovoked, that animal probably would not be on this farm for very much longer. But animal comfort is our number 2. So they can't communicate with us like we communicate with each other. They have to use body language, and it's our jobs to be, experts on their body language and be able to decipher when they're comfortable in the situation and when they're not. And it's our job to be their advocates and their voice to let the people know that they're interacting with them, what they're feeling, if they're comfortable, if they're not. Because we weren't raised by sloths and we don't always pick up on the body language that they may show to us. The same way as dogs, they communicate with each other and they understand that because they're both dogs. But sometimes they'll try to communicate something like that with us. And we might understand a growl, but certain ways they put their ears or certain ways they look at us, that can be to them very clear that they're trying to tell us they're uncomfortable with something and we may not pick up on that. So
I have a Zoe at home. She's
Yeah.
a 7-year-old Labradoodle. Yeah. She lets me know
Oh yeah.
when the other dogs are getting on her nerves
Yeah.
or whatever. She just gives me a look. It's like,
And sloths all have their own personalities like that too, like dogs do. And they all kind of pick their favorite people as well. So with Zoe, that favorite person for her is Donna, John's wife. And she does all of the things at the house and the virtual sides of things. So she's at a computer like all day long doing bookings and calling people back and making sure everything's running from that side of things. So when we first got Zoe, she was our first holding sloth. And so Donna held her a lot because that's what she wanted to do. Anytime she'd go to put her back into her enclosure, she'd be going, meh, meh, and reaching back for her and trying to get her to pick her back up. So obviously she held her a lot. They do. Yeah, and Zoe especially, she gets very vocal. If you set her back down and you don't immediately get out of her enclosure, she is coming back for you, reaching as far and as hard as she can for you to try to pick her back up. And she'll be going, meh, meh. So they do make little whimpering noises like that. They can also make a hiss noise if they're scared or startled by something. And I've heard that once when I was doing an encounter with Zoe. I had just handed Zoe to somebody that was sitting about right there, and Flash was above me, and I didn't realize that he had extended all the way down and was looking to see if I had anything for him to eat. And when I stood back up, I knocked into him. And so in my ear, I heard, I was like, oh, geez, sorry, Flash. So, yeah, they can make hissing noises, and then the females, once they become in heat, they actually let out a really loud screech sound over and over and over again periodically. And if you're into music, it kind of sounds like a D sharp. It's really loud, really high pitched, and that alerts all of the males in the area that she is ready to be bred. And they'll all the ones that hear that will slowly make their way over to her, and it'll be just the first one that will make it there that will be the lucky winner. Everybody else that shows up there late to the party just kind of turns around and goes back. They don't really fight for mates like a lot of other mammals do.
That would be kind of fun to watch, though.
Yep.
A fight with a sloth.
Yeah. Now they can have short bursts of energy if they need to, if they're trying to get away from something or if they're startled. They can use their teeth. They don't have any teeth there in the very front, but if they get enough of something in their mouth, they do have those four really sharp canines.
Yeah.
And in the back, all of their molars are all pointed. They're not flat like ours are. They use that to grind up their food. But if they got a mouthful of an arm or something, they could definitely do damage.
Yeah, that's like the deer. They got teeth. If it's top or bottom, they're like that.
Yeah. Llamas and alpacas do too. They have like fighting teeth is what they call them. The males will use those to fight other males. But if you were to see the skeleton of a sloth or just the skull of a sloth without knowing anything prior about the animal, you would think they were definitely like top up the food chain, like ripping things out of the trees, swinging through the trees 100 miles an hour. But in reality, to see what they actually are is pretty ironic. So I think that God definitely has a sense of humor when how he made some of these animals. It kind of makes you rethink what maybe some of the dinosaurs were like.
Yeah.
So you guys are doing the monkey encounter then after this?
Mhm.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
I had already booked this, and then got an email about the monkey.
Yeah.
It just worked out
Yeah,
that it was
good.
available today.
Yeah. Georgie usually attaches himself to males rather than females, so he probably will be all over you.
Yeah.
It's usually that, it's usually how it goes is that it's the wife that really wants to come, really wants to see the animals, really wants to do the monkey encounter. And the husband's just kind of coming along for, just to support the wife. And with Georgie, monkeys are just completely different animals. And if you really want him to like you, he could care less about you. But most of the time, the guys that are coming with their wives or, with their significant other, they're just kind of just chilling, just not really paying attention to the monkey. And Georgie attaches himself to the guy. So if you just act like you have no cares in the world, then yeah. That's usually how it goes with him anyway. His breeders, they were men, and they always wore a baseball cap, and these guys that are like that.
Kind of like Izzy.
Have a little Yorkie that I got at 7 years old,
Yeah.
and she had been a breed dog. And I know that a lady owned her, and all I can think is that she must have never had a male, like, around men a lot.
Yeah.
Because when I got her, I called her the floozy dog. Because she was okay with me, but she was so slow to warm up to other women.
Mm-hmm.
And now you let a boy show up, she all like, because she
Really?
found out that, okay, they're super nice to me.
Yeah.
I've never met one that's not been super nice to me.
Yeah.
So she does this whole little dance on her hind leg where she wants to be picked up, and I mean, she is all about the boys. Would sit in his lap 22 hours a day, I'm pretty sure.
Usually for the spider monkeys, usually it's that the male spider monkeys tend to attach themselves to women more so, but Georgie's just different, that he really goes for the men that just have no care in the world about him.
We went to, where were we at? Was it in San Diego?
The
No,
monkeys,
we were on
we were somewhere in the
cruise.
Caribbean, and they turned loose about
Probably 50.
Oh my
little
goodness.
squirrel monkeys or something.
Yeah.
Just everywhere, get on your head, just, oh yeah, it was
Like
fun.
they were all like tame ones?
I mean, you probably, and the handlers themselves didn't initiate contact,
Yeah.
but
You
they
just
had
sit
got
there.
them trained
Yeah.
that if you sat there with your hands out,
Mhm.
and especially if, there was any food left in your hand, they would
Yeah.
come.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's how it is with Georgie too. If you reach out for him or you're trying to get his attention, he does not like it whatsoever. That's why people like just keep to themselves and just, don't really acknowledge him a whole lot. That's when he like attaches himself to them.
But why do you like me?
It is right at about time to switch. You guys get any pictures that you wanted of her holding them.
Look,
So you won't have to do anything. He'll climb up onto my arm.
But
And I'll have you guys switch out chairs because that chair's a little bit easier to relax back into.
we had a recliner, we could really relax.
I know. You can see how tiny pinpoint those pupils are as well. They stay like that all the time. They do have a really narrow field of vision. And what they do see, it's kind of like if you were to cup your hands like this together and look through it, that's really all they see. They don't see it until it's right in front of them. They don't really have any peripheral vision. But we only have the two-toed sloths here. We don't have any three-toed sloths because they're a lot more difficult to keep in captivity. Their diets are really specific to what they can and can't eat, and they can really only eat the leaves of the sarcopia trees. Those only grow in Central and South America. They don't grow up here, so it's extremely difficult to keep them in captivity. And even if you attempt it, they don't really have that long of a lifespan. But there are several differences between the two-toed and three-toed sloths. The biggest one being that you can't really keep the three-toed in captivity. But the three-toed sloths are actually a lot smaller than the two-toed as well. So a lot of times they're referred to as pygmies or dwarfs, because they don't really get to be much about 10 pounds, but the two-toed sloths can get up to be 20 pounds. And then a lot of times when people picture a sloth in their head, they see a three-toed sloth. Those are the ones that have that darker band across their eyes. They look like they're always smiling, and those are the ones that have those markings down the middle of their backs, and that's how you can tell the gender of the sloth. The two-toed sloths, you have to do genetic testing to figure out if it's male or female.
Really?
All of their reproductive organs are on the inside, so you can't tell externally what they are.
That's kind of weird.
Yeah.
Huh. Well, you can't hurt them.
That's very true. I'm sure he probably touched on the sloth moth symbiotic relationship and everything, but I usually tend to be a little bit more long-winded on that because that's really what I'm most passionate about because of how just completely intricate it is. And if it was even thrown off just a little bit, if the sloth didn't go to that same pile every time, or the moths did something weird, neither one would be able to survive without the other one in the wild. And so, you guys probably already heard the little spiel about it, but since we are alive, we're just gonna go ahead and talk about it anyway. So they do have a symbiotic relationship with them, so that means they both benefit. So the sloths need the moths, and the moths need the sloth in order to survive in the wild. They do, once a week when the sloth comes down to go to the bathroom, the moths require the sloth to come down to that spot, because if they didn't, and the sloth went to a different place, or, even just a different side of the tree, those moths would not be able to come back onto the sloth after they hatch. So when they come down there, the moths will come down and lay their eggs in the waste product of the sloth. And it takes about 2 weeks for that cycle to be completely, rotated through. So last week's eggs are this week's larva, and this week's larva are next week's moths. And they have to go to that same spot because they require direct contact. Once those larvae hatch out into adult moths, they can't just fly up to the canopy of the rainforest and find that sloth wherever it may be. If it did, the sloth would have to go to the same pile every time. But when they come back down, those moths will then crawl up onto the sloth. And it's important for the sloth that they have those on there, because they'll not only eat a portion of those, that's their protein source, but they'll also lick up a portion of the moth's waste. And there's a specific bacteria in the waste product of the moth that when the sloth licks it up, that's how they digest their food. And so if they didn't have those moths, or the moth population deteriorated and they ate half of them and there weren't any left, then when the temperature fluctuated, that bacteria they have in their gut could be wiped out, and then they don't have a way to digest their food if they can't lick up more of that bacteria that's on their backs. And that bacteria is really sensitive to temperature changes, and since the sloth can't maintain their own body temperature, if it was to drop outside around 73 degrees, that bacteria is wiped out, they need a way to replenish that. However, captive sloths, once they establish that bacteria colony from their mother around day 3, they get just a little bit from mom, and then bacteria will do what bacteria does, and in the gut of the sloth will slowly start to germinate, colonate, develop its own bacteria colony. And after that happens, they'll keep that colony the rest of their lives and be able to digest their food successfully. But if something were to happen, like we left the door cracked overnight, it was in the fall or the winter, and the temperature dropped in their enclosures, we could come back in and that sloth's bacteria colony would be completely